Such were the beginnings of the notion of proletarian dictatorship in European socialism. It was a heritage that tends to confirm Marx's later characterization of the petite bourgeoisie, while suggesting some of the it's like socialism for us, not you, whores. That's what that's telling me. Maybe I'm wrong. Please tell me if I am. While suggesting some of the political forms and consequences of such presumptions. It is also useful to note that at no point had the conspiracy become a popular or mass movement. Cole observes that Babeuf's movement never really took shape as a nationwide revolutionary campaign. It found its support, as the Jacobins had done, mainly in larger towns and preeminently in Paris, where its following was attracted to it mainly by the condition of scarcity and unemployment that followed upon the reluctance of emancipated peasants to keep the town supplied with the necessary life. Yeah, I was wrong. Nor did it ever command more than a small fraction even of the urban proletariat. It was a conspiracy of a few who aimed at drawing after them the large elements of urban discontent arising mainly out of sheer hunger. It would be another 30 years before the working class movement gave evidence of its influence in much longer than that before the principles of a socialist society became dominant in European social movements. Following the execution of Babeuf and his co-conspirators, it is not until almost mid-century, the years noted for the appearance of Marx and Engels, that thinkers in the socialist tradition became actively engaged in working class politics. Okay. The historians of socialist thought take this period for what it is, the relationship to their subject, and then unanimously commit themselves to exegesis. What? Yeah. How you spell it? What? Okay. Sorry. Lo siento para mí. Yo no sé.
Exegesis.
Exegesis. Critical explanation or interpretation of a text. This was the time where they was committed to researching the texts with a critical explanation and interpretation of said text. That's what it was. Why'd I screenshot that? Sorry. Can we not? The literary, pamphleteering, and historical works of forgotten and dimly remembered writers, with the rare interruption of a Bonaparti, Blanqui or Blanc, were sequenced to form the tapestry of socialist thought. Okay, so they was looking in the archives. It is a period dominated by eccentrics, visionaries, and didacts. Okay. The wistful trails of Godwin, Payne, Fourier, Saint Simon Cabet Pecure. I'm not gonna take the time to look up all these names, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Pecure, lesser and grander lights preoccupy the historians along with some of the most short-lived utopian communities associated with them. Okay, per. I heard one person say that and now I can't stop. The agitations, rebellions, riots, and struggles for artisans, wage laborers, peasants, and slave laborers are largely irrelevant to the tradition in the early 19th century and mostly constituted as background noise of the era. That's the problem. That's the people that did it. You're going to ignore the people? Yes. Ignoring the people. That's what the... I'm going to write that down. Because what do the people want? I don't know. To live? Is the era of the socialist writer. The historical issues that arise are each writer's contribution to socialist theory, and whether or not the systems that were constructed should be properly categorized as socialist. This is a particularly telling historical project, since so many of the historians, like Coles, Lichams, Beers, are themselves sympathetic to the tradition they reconstruct. Their work becomes a demonstration of the independence of socialist theory and social movements from one another. Oh, they don't think of them as interconnected, as like sisters and brothers. They're like, we're different. When once again they collide in the 1840s, 1870s, and early 1900s, each had assumed forms and prerogatives only slightly tolerable of those of the other. While the movements of the working classes tended towards an accommodation with capitalism in the form of trade unionist demands, abandoning revolutionary initiatives to those whose social origins were, most often, the peasants and petite bourgeoisie classes, socialist theory became more and more dominated by the figure of revolutionary proletariat. Put a little note. Okay. Marx, under the influence of both of his readings of Hegel and his intense encounters with a number of intellects of his own generation who had identified themselves as Hegelians, David Strauss, Bruno Bauer, Karl Koppmann, Moses Hess, Lorenz von Steen, and Ludwig Feuerbach, who had sought to construct an epistemological system founded on materialism as a meta-theoretic, the currency underneath social structures and forms. Okay? What he had tried to do was what Marx wanted to do under the influence of all these people, wanted to construct an epistemological system founded on materialism as a meta-theoretic, the currency underneath social structures and forms. This is what he said. My inquiry led me to the conclusion that neither legal relations nor political forms could be comprehended whether by themselves or on the basis of the so-called general development of the human mind, but, on the contrary, they originate in the material condition of life. That's what he said. That the anatomy of the civil society has to be sought in political economy, whatever that means. History for Marx became the antagonistic play of the relations of living social categories whose existence was predicated on the particular character of production and property that had been the basis of social life. Political economy was thus the most fundamental of historical inquiries. The materialist conception of history situated the objective and necessary forces of a society, distinguishing their significance from those categories of human activity that were the result of pure speculation, quote, in parentheses, idealism, and ideology. As Marx's theoretical work proceeded, the progressive tendency to place the study of capitalist forms of production, exchange, and distribution at the center of his work became more and more pronounced. He was looking at, instead of looking at the people, He was focusing on the capitalist forms of production, exchange, and distribution for his work. That became the center rather than and putting the people behind. Oh, that's what that. Okay. His frequent sojourns into the study of revolutions were dictated by their occurrence. He would write in 1850 articles later published in The Class Struggle in France, and in 1851 the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte as studies of the 1848 revolutionary movement in France in 1871 the Civil War in France as a statement of the Paris Commune of the same year, and the degree to which Marx believed them to be important testaments to the political and methodological efficacy of the materialist conception of history. Marx, Engels, and nationalism. Queens. We only have to get to page 12 pages, and then we have conclusion. 1, 2, 3, and then we get to the good part. Okay, I'm so excited. The bulk of almost 2 decades. I had some really good cake. It's a crumble cinnamon cake. It's one of my favorite cakes. I do not like icing. It's right here. I'm saving the best part for last. The top is from Corner Bakery. My favorite cake. I swear to God, it's so good. Maybe I can dip it in coffee. It's a crumble coffee. The bulk of almost 2 decades that Marx spent on his economics largely sandwiched between the revolutions of 1848 and the appearance of the rather more ambiguous International in 1864, though substantially marked by intensive research, writing, mathematical training, and theoretical development, was also a period of extreme frustration, plagued by what he constantly referred to as bourgeoisie troubles, indebtedness, familial demands, and disruptions, and debilitating illness. Oh, hold up. And debilitating illnesses. Oh. Illnesses. Carbuncles and boils. Marx celebrated temper and sometimes mean preoccupations compelled him into drawn quarrels, some petty but no less vicious, with Karl Vogt, Ferdinand Lassalle, and dirty Breslau Jew, Giuseppe Mazzini, and even one, probably only one, with Engels following the death of Mary Burns. This is who he's fighting with. Most of the result of Marx's proprietary attitudes towards a party, the Communist League, which he himself in 1860 had declared defunct since 1852. One of these disputes, however, is particularly instructive here, for it reveals in dramatic terms the ideological restraints and theoretical bounds that place Marx and Engels in an especial disadvantage in their confrontation with the form of nationalism beginning to surface by the mid-19th century. Okay. That's the part we need to focus on. This part. Instructive here, for it reveals in dramatic terms the ideological restraints and theoretical bounds that place Marx and Engels in an especial disadvantage in their confrontation with the form of nationalism beginning to surface in the mid-19th century. Because nationalism was the most important ideology of our time, its treatment by Marx and Engels, and later Marxists can be informative both with respect to the essence of Marxist thought as well as the ideology. Sometimes I get insecure about what I post. I'm just a girl. Sorry, that just reminded me to delete it. I'm a human being. Human beings are allowed to be insecure. Sometimes I don't care. Sometimes I put it back up, but I'm gonna delete a lot of stuff. It's more like I don't want everyone, like, only a select few people get to see it, and then whoever doesn't. I delete stuff all the time. Sorry, that doesn't matter. Sometimes there's a lot of thoughts running in my head at once. Because I already said that. The nationalism in question was German. A notion from which Marx and Engels had been in enforced exile for several years. Exile, however, is hardly a satisfactory defense in this instance because Marx and Engels, as leaders of the German democratic in parentheses socialist movement, were in almost daily touch with the German correspondents. It is true that as immigrés from Germany, Marx and Engels can be expected to have drawn increasingly distant from the ambitions and moods of working-class organizations at home. Franz Mehring, one of Marx's most sympathetic biographers, notes that in Marx's and Engels' argument with Lassalle over the consequences for the German revolutionary struggle of a war between Germany, Prussia, and the German League, and Italy, the Kingdom of Sardinia, and France. The two friends had to pay for having lost touch with the conditions in Germany for so long. Given the world historical scope that Marx and Engels attempted to achieve in their work, however, Mehring's intervention by interpretation appears excessively apologetic and not particularly instructive. He failed to come to terms with the political ideological effect that Marx's notion of the logic of capitalist development would incur. There's a lot of words. Let's take a little breather. That looked cool. Okay, in brief, the situation was this. Here's the tea, is what that just said to me. Neither Italy, Germany, or France, and for that matter, Austria, had yet achieved territorial configurations that conformed to the ambitions of their ruling and military elites, nor the natural, in parentheses, ethnic and linguistic affections of their nationalistic citizenry. Okay, let's highlight that. La 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 la. Cavour, the prime minister of the Sardinian Kingdom, had gradually been the Sardinian Kingdom is part of Italy. Had gradually been converted from a repressive and anti-nationalist to extreme skilled unificationist by the persistent development and growth of nationalistic sympathy and organization both on the Italian peninsula and among the exiles his government had been so instrumental in relocating. By the outbreak of the Crimean War in 1854, Cavour had become convinced that the French army would be the critical tool for the expulsion of Austria from central Italy and the achievement of a decisive advantage for Piedmont, continental Sardinia, over the Papal States. He was pressured. Cavour appears to have presumed the kingdom of the two Sicilies beyond his reach. Cavour saw to it that the Sardinian troops accompanied the British and French armies when they invaded Russia in 1848. The Crimean War ultimately resulted in the weakening of both Austria and Russia, and at the Peace Conference in Paris, 1856, Austria's Italian possessions, Venetia and Lombardy, became a matter for discussion as a breach of the Vienna Settlement, 1815. It appears that diplomatic considerations and the brutal and continuing suppression of Italian rebels by Austria had joined to make Austria's position in Italy untenable. By 1858, Napoleon III convinced on the one hand as a Bonaparte that Italy was ancestral country. And on the other hand, that French power required a larger destiny than that bounded by the defeat of his imperial uncle had met secretly. Read that wrong. And on the other hand, that French power required a large destiny than that bounded by the defeat of his imperial uncle had met secretly with Cavour and agreed on a joint venture against Austria. Ooh, they sneaking. I'm gonna make some bow tie pasta tonight. Piedmont was to lure Austria into a declaration of war. The French army would intervene against the aggressor Austria. France would be rewarded by the ceding of the Savoy and Nice provinces. Sardinia, by incorporating Lombardy, Venetia, and the central duchies, would become the kingdom of North Italy. Maring continues the story. On New Year's Day, 1859, Bonaparte received the Austrian ambassador in audience and informed him on the French intentions, while a few days later, the King of Sardinia announced to the world that he was not deaf to the heart-rending appeals of the Italian people. Oh my gosh, you know what I really hate? When people yell up to me. My sister's yelling at me. Yes! I'm recording a video. I hate yelling. I don't hate yelling. I love it. She's really... Okay, that annoys me. Why won't you bring it upstairs? She got me a smoothie. Okay, let me just read this part and then I'm gonna pause. On New Year's Day, 1859, Bonaparte received the Austrian ambassador in audience and informed him of the French intentions, whilst a few days later the King of Sardinia announced to the world that he was not deaf to the heart-rending appeals of the Italian people. These threats were perfectly understood in Vienna. The Austrian government was clumsy enough to let itself be maneuvered into the role of attacker. Ooh, he got played. Half bankrupt, attacked by France, and threatened by Russia, it was in a difficult position. So it therefore sought to win the support of the German League. It tried to persuade the League that the maintenance of Austrian oppression in Italy was a matter of vital national importance for Germany. Wait, how many? I just want my smoothie though. Would you be mad at me if I paused? This is a long one. Oh, this is the last one. This is the one I'm finishing my notes on. Okay, let me pause.